Hello everyone, welcome to Biohackers World. We are here in LA. My name is Sierra Clark. I am the host of Human, which is a YouTube docuseries show where we interview top biohackers, scientists, and high performers. Today we are joined by the lovely Nadège, who is a sex scholar, best-selling author, and founder of Pleasure Science, where she helps you feel healthier and more empowered in your sexuality. Today we are diving into all things sex. Ultimately, trying to understand how a fulfilling sexual life can also be a power driver for better health. We're going to start off with something that's a little bit fun. So Nadège, if you can tell us, what are a few fun facts about sex that you think everyone should know?
Oh my gosh, I love this question. So first, the average clitoris is 4 inches long and it gets an erection just like a penis. All animals have erectile tissue. Every single animal, this includes every gender of human, gets an erection. And one reason why I love this fact is because so many of us were taught that an erection like kind of rules the timeline of sex in a sense. Like when you see the cock get hard, and by the way, we're gonna say some words today and you're gonna be okay. When the cock gets hard, we think, okay, now it's time to move to penetration. And we see this in queer relationships between men. We see this in heterosexual relationships. And so really the one place we don't see this is in queer relationships that are more sapphic or with people who are trans and non-binary who tend to have more orgasms and more pleasure during sex because they're not, and we aren't, because I'm queer, I know you are too, like we're on a different kind of timeline and trajectory because all of these things we're taught about sex don't apply in those bedrooms, if you will. So that's one of my favorite fun facts because I feel like knowing that everybody gets an erection is just so empowering and it reminds you to center your pleasure as well as the pleasure of your lover, right? And so that's one. Another one is your brain is your biggest sex organ. And so that's a super fun fact because if you figure out, like that's one of the reasons why I'm at this Biohackers World Summit. People might think like, what does sex have to do with biohacking? Everything in a sense, because sex rules everything with your health, with your pleasure, with your mental health. But your brain being your biggest sex organ, if I can give everyone a tip, it's do a 14-day experiment where you are not going to shame your fantasies. You give yourself permission to fantasize without shame. I don't care how taboo it is or how taboo you think your thoughts are. Your brain is a safe space. It will not harm you. In fact, studies actually show the opposite. It is healthy and cathartic for us to fantasize about sex without shame. It will actually change your brain chemistry for the better. And let me think, another fun sex fact is some dragonflies have 2 penises.
Oh yes.
Like, that's cool.
That is wild.
Yeah.
And also why? Like why exactly?
Yeah,
it's really fascinating.
I know, right? We need to talk to like an insectologist and be like, what's happening with the dragonflies? Like,
so bringing us back to early days for you, I understand that you were taught by nuns in a more conservative environment, which is super interesting. So tell us how you went from that upbringing to becoming a sex scholar. What brought you here today?
Yeah, well, I was always the person who would get questions about sex. And when I was really young, I had a library card really early. My mom was like, go to the library, read books. And so I would go and I would rent out books on puberty and sex because I was curious. I had no idea what was happening with my body. And I somehow knew that like that wasn't okay with me, like not having information about my body. And so then I would go to school and people would be like, oh, my vagina's sweating. And I'd be like, I could tell you why that is. And I'm just like this plucky 12-year-old, you know?
I love it.
And so that's sort of where it began. And then I was taught by nuns. I went to a Catholic high school. And then I also grew up in a conservative Jewish community. My household, I was actually raised by artists. And so I also think that helped where on the one end, I went to a Catholic high school. I was taught by nuns. My sex ed training was don't have sex. It was literally Mean Girls. You'll get chlamydia and die. And here are the worst photos you could ever imagine of what'll happen to your body, which is usually what never happens to your body. And I always wanted to write books actually, but I thought I wanted to write books on like dragons and fairies and witches, which I still do behind, like for myself.
Yes.
But I went to UC Berkeley to be an English major and then realized they had gender women's studies and sexology as a department. And I was like, wait a minute, I have always been the sex person. I have always found information about this. And I've always been the person that people go to about this, just in my friend group, just personally. Right. And so I changed everything. I changed my major to sex at Berkeley. I started studying it, and here we are. You know, I never left in a sense.
And we're so lucky to have you in this space. Honestly, this kind of information is really important and touches all of our lives.
Yeah.
So speaking about sexual wellness and health, that connection is not necessarily obvious. So what is that connection between sexual wellness and leading a healthier life?
Yeah, well, you know, we can really start with relationships. If we look at every psychological study we could find, we see that relationships are some of the most important aspects of our health. It affects our emotional health, our mental health, and then it does affect our physical health as well, because if your mental health is not doing well, your physical health is going to deteriorate. And then sex comes in as this way that we create a psychic love bond connection with other people. And you can do that. Casual sex can create it, and so can long-term sex or long-term relationship sex. But when we think of how sex influences our health, one, relationships, it also increases our self-esteem. I think casual sex is so healthy because it can boost your self-esteem and it can remind you like, hey, you still got it. But there's also other things, you know, it improves your brain chemistry, it increases your lifespan. Orgasm literally increases your lifespan. So does masturbation. We should be masturbating as much as we want to. It's also normal if you're someone who doesn't masturbate often. There's no right or wrong way to be sexual. And in fact, I think the first part is really defining what sex means to you. Because there's also people on the asexual spectrum. Right. So there are people who love relationships and love connection, but sex is not going to be their gateway. But if you were to ask them, well, what would you like define intimacy as, they also have a definition. So it doesn't matter where you fall on your libido or your sexuality. We see that sex is a way that we improve relationships, we sustain relationships, and that we connect with our body. It's incredibly healthy. And in fact, so many, well, actually, sex was the first thing humans came together to worship. One of the things I do is study sex history, and we can date back worshiping and celebrating sex over 50,000 years. So
many biohackers were very focused on the nutrition, the exercise, all of these like very visible components. And sex oftentimes isn't the first thing that we think about biohacking, so to speak. But why is it important to prioritize sexual health? And is there a way that we could biohack it, so to speak, if it's not going so well?
Yeah, you can absolutely biohack sex, 100%. But I would say, wait, say the question again, because there were elements to it and I want to hit each element.
Yeah, so we tend to focus on these other things. Why is it important to ensure that your sexual health is really fulfilled and you're living your best sex life? And also, is there a way to biohack it?
Yeah. And so a way to ensure that you're living your best sex life, one is getting tested regularly. I like to get tested for STIs every 6 months. If I'm in a long-term monogamous relationship, maybe once a year. And it's so interesting that like a lot of folks, we don't get tested. We've almost normalized not getting tested. And that's the first step with our sexual health. And whatever results you get, there's nothing wrong with it. It's all okay, you know? And in fact, I find a lot of times we don't get tested because we're maybe afraid we'll get news we don't want. But listen, one of my greatest friends is a herpes advocate, and she says getting herpes was the greatest thing that ever happened to her. Because one, it made her very mindful of her health, and two, it created a great buffer for people who were not sexually mature. Right? So that's one part is the pure, just your health, right? But the other element that is really important with sexual health and biohacking sex is really what it does for our self-esteem and for our brain and for our intimacy and relationships. Like these are all the things to think about. And so when we think about biohacking, you're right, it's often these like more tangible things. But with biohacking sex, it's about scheduling sex with your lover, especially if you're in and this doesn't mean that you no longer have spontaneous sex. It means that you two are committing to your intimacy, and you know that even if the kids are crazy or work is crazy or whatever, you know that on Friday night you have intimacy time scheduled.
You have that time. Mm-hmm.
That's really important. So that's one simple way to biohack sex. Another simple way is to make masturbation something that is more about your self-pleasure, and that is also a priority. You do not need to be in a relationship to biohack your sex life or improve your sex life. And masturbation is also not cheating. It's really important for your health. And it's especially important for confidence and sexual confidence because we have 100% control over solo pleasure.
Right.
We can explore our body, understand ourselves. We can give ourselves erotic nourishment, which is really important. And it also helps our brain. And one reason why masturbation can improve your self-esteem is you're no longer living in this reality where in order to have sex, I must rely on someone else. In order to improve this area, I must rely on someone else. Like, what if you're single and shy? And then you're thinking like, oh, well, I can't improve my sex life. I never meet anybody, right? And so masturbation is so important. And then we can go into those are like simple entry-level holistic. And then there's different supplements you can take. There's different experts on like helping with orgasm is something that happens with your muscles, sexual arousal, erection. These are all muscle functions. So when we're thinking of biohacking, are the supplements you're taking helping with your muscles? That can be a really good...
Are there a couple of supplements that you recommend to people if they're needing some support?
Yeah, I love the 20. The 20 is it was created by a sexologist named Susan Bratton. There are several different, and that's another thing. If we're trying to biohack sex, let's look for products created either by sex experts or with sex in mind, because we actually just met someone outside who is a biohacker, and he was like, we started our company actually because of sexual pleasure, and now it does so many other things.
Right, the Root brand.
Yeah, and so, but that's one that I really like, the 20. I think it's just the 20.com. They have several different supplements and they're each a little designed for different things. So you can kind of see what your needs are. But yeah.
And then top 3 tips. Like if someone is feeling like, oh, my sexual life is not on point, it's not where I'd like it to be. What are your top 3 tips for that person?
So my first tip would be to know your flirt style. Most of us think that we can't flirt because we don't know how we flirt. And in mainstream media, we're only shown 2 examples of what flirting is supposed to look like. And it's the confident type going after the mysterious type, right? The second I say that, you don't even know the flirt styles, but you know what I'm talking about. And so if you want to know your flirt style, go to pleasurescience.com, take my flirt quiz. So that way you can know what your flirt style is. That's instantly going to change the way you show up because you now know how you connect with other people. And you know the best places to set yourself up for success. I'd say another tip is make talking about sex with your lover, whether it's casual or long-term, something you do regularly. And there's some tips that go along with that. You know, one tip is try not to talk about sex where you have sex. This can confuse the purpose and meaning of the conversation. Like if we just woke up and I'm like, babe, let's talk about sex, my partner might be like, okay, so does Nadege want to have sex after this?
I see.
I'm probably going into this, I'm anxious, I'm nervous, we're going to talk about some stuff. I'm not interested in having sex. I just want to talk about this. So it's good to have those conversations in places where you don't have sex. It's also great to initiate it, maybe if you're on a hike or walking a dog, or even if you're driving in a car. And the reason is you don't have to make eye contact with your lover the whole time. That actually soothes your nervous system.
Interesting.
But using these little hacks to talk about sex, there are over 48 studies that show that sexual communication, sorry, I totally had an ADD moment.
No.
There are over 48 studies that show that sexual communication improves erectile dysfunction, vaginal wetness, longevity in relationships, orgasms. So sexual communication is a big place to start. And I don't care if it's casual, talk about it. And another thing actually is casual sex is just as meaningful and important as long-term sex.
And that is okay.
And that's okay. And we should really make it normal to talk with our lover about our feelings and how we feel and relationship expectations. That's another thing we often miss. So I'd say those are some great tips to start with biohacking sex.
Well, either way, you started off with talking about sex, not in a place that is the place where you actually have sex. What was the one that you just said?
The other one, talk about relationship expectations and make sure that in casual connections, we are normalizing that like everyone is going to have feelings. Oxytocin, the bonding hormone, is released when we have sex. Even if it's casual and you know logically, like I'm not going to date this person, attachments will form, and that's normal. If casual sex is going to be good, we need to have the space to talk about that and be mature about it. But that also, a part of doing that is being upfront about relationship expectations. It's telling your lover like, yeah, we can talk about our feelings because I want us to, because this will create intimacy, freedom, pleasure. When we can talk about our feelings, sex is so much better. But the other part of that, if it's casual, is, and I'm not your partner. And when we leave, like respect my boundaries of like, yeah, like I'm not going to text you every day. It's not because I don't like you. It's because we're not dating. Right. And so those two things are super, super important. Like the honoring emotion, but also being honest about relationship expectations.
Nadège, you are a powerhouse filled with such important information. I'm so glad we're having this conversation. For folks who want to learn more about sexual wellness, where can they go to learn more? Yeah,
well, my company is called Pleasure Science. You could go to www.pleasurescience.com. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Pleasure Science if you want to make sexual empowerment your new normal, because I'm always talking cool stuff over there.
I love it.
And listen to the Pleasure Science podcast. This is where I dive deep into fascinating things that you want to know that you've never learned before, like how monogamy was created, like the most interesting facts on sex, how to open up a relationship successfully. I chat with some of the most incredible experts, and you can find the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. And be sure to watch us on YouTube. It's really fun over there.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Nadège. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right.
Yay! Oh, you're such a good interviewer.
All right, and if you have not yet been to Biohackers World, guess what? We're coming to Chicago in July and Miami in November. You absolutely want to be there. These events are unlike anything else, and I've never even seen a longevity and health optimization conference in Chicago. So I'm so excited to see all of you in Chicago at Biohackers World.